Drink beer, it's good for you. I'm empty-handed and I'm feeling blue, and I'm gonna drink till the day that I die.
Hello and welcome to this, the second part of my Norwegian farmhouse ale series. I was told that after 48 hours I could actually top crop this yeast, and 48 hours have now elapsed, so it's time to start. When handling yeast, it's especially essential to be squeaky clean. This means that merely cleaning and then sanitizing is just simply not enough. My procedure then is to pour boiling hot water into each of the containers and then put them in a pot of boiling water and boil for a further 15 minutes. You will also notice the stainless steel spoon that's in this boil as well. That also gets the same treatment. Okay, so let's have a look in our first container. This is the Midtbust from Stordal. You can see there's an awful lot of yeast cells on the top here, so this is going to be a great one to top crop. For those that have never top cropped before, it's really such a very easy process. All you're doing is literally skimming the top off. That's it. You collect it, you put it in a jar, done. After that, simply fill up the jar with water. This needs to be the pure water that you've obviously boiled for some time and have allowed obviously to cool. This is then added to your fridge. I would suggest that you tighten the lid all the way up and then loosen it off a bit. I then took a gravity reading and found that this one is actually finished fermentation in 48 hours. It can take a little bit longer than that, this one apparently. I was told by a reliable source that all Kveik yeast is generally done at 1.015, and as you can see this one is under that, so it's all good and ready. Okay, so this is the Saura Kveik, and this one also, you can see there's an awful lot of yeast here at the top, so this again is perfect for top cropping. This particular Kveik has actually been existing since the 16th century. I took a gravity reading on this one, and yes, as you can see, this one is also done. Totally fermented out in 48 hours. Very nice. Okay, so this is the Raftevoll. Please note the silent D in Norwegian. And despite being a traditionally top-cropped Kveik, you can see there isn't really much to be had here. I grabbed what I could though, obviously, and there were some flakes that were just underneath the top that I managed to grab, so hopefully that'll be useful. I will be harvesting from the bottom anyway, so yeah, it's all fine, but I may as well grab what I can. So, third and final gravity reading, and yep, you guessed it. This one's done in 48 hours also. Fantastic. So what I did next was I poured all of the gravity samples into glasses and I labelled them accordingly. Then I popped it all in the fridge and waited for one of my colleagues to arrive. We figured that if this beer is ready now to be bottled and the beer is ready to be drunk after 2 days, then why not just try it now? And that's exactly what we did. So here is our early bird 1 day tasting notes. Before I go into specific notes for each of the 3 beers, there's something that needs to be said. And that is that none of the 3 tasted anything like standard beers would taste at final gravity pre-bottling stage. Already at this very early stage they had complexity with an aged taste to them. It was astonishing. For each of the different Kveik that we tested here, I'm actually including a background picture from the area in Norway where they come from. With the Saura, we have light citrus farmhouse aroma, with white pepper, light juniper, with quite a dry, rounded, nice taste. We also noticed a slight rubber taste in the background. Don't misunderstand this though, this was not the rubber taste that you would get from yeast that is dying or of a bad health. This was actually quite pleasant. I know it sounds strange, but it really was. Next up we had the Midtbust, and this is from Stordal. This one certainly blew our minds the most. It just tasted so great, and we just couldn't believe that it was only 48 hours previous that we actually brewed this beer. This one has a fantastic pear fruit and candy aroma. It really hits the nose nicely. The taste of this one was very fruity pear with a more gin-like juniper taste intertwined. It also had a light grain taste, which really added to it. We were really surprised by this one. And finally, the Roftevoll. This one was also very surprising with a cocoa/cognac almost alcohol aroma. Very unusual. Really nice smell though. Tasting notes were as follows: light grain, light pepper, with a light warm aftertaste, almost cognac-like in certain parts of this taste. It was a bit sharp, but certainly not in a bad way, and very complex already, which was a big surprise. So there you have it, that's the day one tastings done, and I have to say all of these beers were perfectly drinkable at this stage. Amazing, crazy, but true. Right, so now it's time to bottle these, and I need to prepare for the bottom yeast harvesting that I'm going to do. So I've got 3 of these containers, and they're all being boiled for 15 minutes each. Here's my pair of Blickman brewing gloves, and these become especially useful when removing these pots from the boiling water. Once these are all boiled up and ready, I'll put some pre-boiled water into each of them, and that will be used for the yeast harvesting too. Naturally, this water is allowed to cool before we pour it onto the yeast. The next step is to actually break up everything that's on the bottom, and you know, it's kind of difficult to do this with one hand effectively, but I'm sure you understand that with 2 hands you can do this rather fast. From time to time, and this shouldn't take too long, you want to basically lift the water up from the bottom of the bucket like I'm doing here and just see what's sticking. So once you've got it so that everything is off the bottom in the container, then it's time to transfer it over to one of your jugs. So now we've got this in the jug, and you can see that it's already starting to settle in the bottom there, and then it goes in the fridge. I tend to leave them in the fridge overnight. There's really no rush before I do the next part. So this process was now done for all 3 of our different Kveik yeast, and they joined the top cropped yeast jars as well. Naturally, all 3 beers got bottled at this point also, and this is my share of the bounty of this brew. Okay, so the day after the bottling now, and we can see that everything has settled very much to the bottom here. Just between the gunk in the bottom and the liquid in this, you can see a white line. That's the yeast that we're now looking to obtain. So the next step now is to very slowly decant that liquid off of the top. As soon as you start to see any potential yeast particles coming along, this is your sign as to when to stop. You then pour this into a smaller jar, and it should look a little bit like this. Top up with more water. This obviously needs to be some of your pre-boiled stuff. Put it all the way up to the top, and have a nice look at some much purer yeast. This can be done several times. Sometimes even people use 5 times of doing this until they get down into a container which is small enough for them to be happy. Up to you. Do keep in mind though that every time you do this you could potentially disturb the yeast. And now I have here one of our top cropped examples, and you can see this is far cleaner, and to be honest the quality and the health of the yeast when top cropped much better, and I'd recommend this method above all. Personally I do both, but then I'm just greedy. Just like with the bottom cropped Kveik, I did a washing of this one also, putting it into a smaller container that you can see here. The observant ones of you will actually realise that I've finally learnt how to spell this damn name of this Kveik. The Englishman inside me wants to put English sounding names to it. It's not mid-burst, but mid-bust. Yeah. Okay, so it's now day 6, and we're going to do another tasting of these beers, and by God, I've got to tell you, these have changed immensely. In just 6 days. Can't believe it, to be honest. But yeah. This is Kveik. The other thing to mention is that none of these got carbonation sugar added to them before they were bottled, and yet all of them have some level of low carbonation. Okay, so first up we have the Sora, and I have to say that this one tasted very, very similar to what I would expect from a fairly stereotypical Belgian saison. The characteristic difference being that you would really need to wait for about 2 months to get to this stage of conditioning with a traditional Belgian yeast. Not with Kveik. We got here in 6 days. Tasting notes are as follows. This has a very nice citrus aroma. It's certainly a very easy drinking beer, and it's very fruity and saison-like. This one certainly has a little bit of sweetness to it, and it's certainly very, very fresh and clean tasting. That was the other thing I noticed about these styles, is that there's no real yeast in the bottom of the bottles. So that allowed for a much cleaner feel, I guess. All in all, this is a very inviting beer. And now on to the Midburst. This one has a very mixed fruit aroma to it, very, very pleasant. It's also a very easy drinking beer, and this one to me was very much like a Belgian pale ale. Extremely fruity, very drinkable, obviously a little bit more alcohol than you'd expect in a Belgian pale ale, but not far off. Again, this one was slightly sweet, and also very fresh and clean like the other. I particularly love the pear aftertaste that this one has. Absolutely delicious. Here you can see that I've put a light behind the Midburst, and yeah, look at that colour. Fantastic. Okay, last but certainly by no means least, we have the Rafterval. This one also had a very nice mixed fruit aroma. Again, it was a very easy drinking beer and very moorish, but this one was very much like a Belgian blonde. I'm seeing a theme here. This one certainly begins quite sweet, but ends dry, which is a very nice effect that I enjoy a lot in different beers. Again, like the others, this also had a very clean and fresh taste to it. Right, so that's all 3 of these now tasted, but which of the 3 did I prefer? I'll be honest with you, I think these all were really, really nice beers, and I simply can't pick a favourite at this stage. I think I need to do a lot more tasting, a lot more testing, and then maybe one day I would have figured it out. The other thing to keep in mind is that with the dramatic changes seen in just 6 days, and by God it was drinkable on day 1 anyway, how are these going to taste in another week's time, or another month's time, or even in 6 months' time? I will certainly let you know. Just a reminder now about the group that I mentioned in my first video. This is a very nice international group of people who are very passionate about Kveik. Here you can get lots of information and ask questions, and also source yourself some of this very special yeast. Kveik yeast is available in both dry and liquid forms, and I'd recommend that if you're asking to be shipped this internationally, then make sure you get the dry version. As I'm sure you've all picked up by now, I'm really blown over by how fantastic this stuff is, and such a quick turnaround. It's just absolutely perfect. So I hope you all found this video interesting and useful. I will at some point be doing further videos to do with Kveik, so look out for those, and regular beers also, all coming soon. So if you did like this video, then please do go ahead and like it on YouTube. This really helps me out and allows the videos to be seen by a wider audience on YouTube. I've got a lot of videos in the pipeline for the future, so if you're interested in seeing what I've got coming up, then please subscribe for future content. If you have any questions on anything that I've covered in this video or in others, or anything to do with brewing in general, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. I'm more than happy to help. Until then, happy brewing!